Hey everybody, it's the dude here, back to bring you another video. This time, I will again be talking about The Walking Dead. In episode 2 of season 8, we find our group, Alexandria, the Hilltop, and the Kingdom, attacking 3 separate Saviors' outposts. They attacked the Sanctuary in the previous episode, distracting Negan and his main dudes with a huge herd of zombies. Within these 3 battles, there are really 4 stories. At the outpost being assaulted by Team Alexandria, there's a story outside this big firefight between some Saviors we've never seen and all of the red shirt Alexandrians, with Aaron at the lead, and there's a story inside that same compound with Rick and Daryl. Back over at the satellite station outpost, which apparently has been refilled with a bunch of killable Saviors since the last time the group took it over, we got a Morgan, Jesus, and Tara story, and then lastly you have the Kingdom, led by Carol and Ezekiel, and that's the one I'm going to start with first. Before I go any further, I'm going to give you a spoiler warning. If you haven't seen the episode, I'm not sure why you clicked on the video, but that's okay. Please just leave a like and be on your way. As well as talking about the show, I'm also going to talk about the comics and what happened, comparing and contrasting. So with all that said, let's get into our first story, Carol and Ezekiel. I'm covering this one first because it's the least interesting. We actually do not finish their story within this episode. The beginning of their attack on their outpost actually began at the end of the first episode this season. As everything else was going on and like Gabriel was being abandoned, we see all the Kingdom Knights and Ezekiel and Carol approach an outpost, use too much ammo, and then get a smoke bomb dropped on them. And that was used as a transition to go back to the Sanctuary where we saw all the zombies piling in. It didn't really make sense what we were seeing in that first episode. Now it was obviously the beginning of this assault. Most of their story this episode is them tracking the one guy who threw the smoke bomb, and their story ends when they finally get to the outpost. Jerry hears over the comms that the Saviors are ready for them. They know that they're coming, because the guy they failed to kill with their 25,000 bullets made it to the outpost and warned them. And at the end, Ezekiel says, "No bother, we will go and we will fight them anyway." Whatever he says, their story ends setting up for the next episode. And it feels like they're kind of setting them up for failure. Ezekiel is far too cocky. Now that's not different than usual, but it's pretty clear to the audience that his confidence is unwarranted. Their cover's been blown, they should pull back and attack later. At the end, Ezekiel just raises his sword like that means something, and Carol is just like, And that's kind of how Carol was the whole episode. I don't really get it. She wasn't like getting Ezekiel in line. She didn't have any plans of her own. She was kind of just going along with it. And that's not really the position I want to see Carol in. I want her to take charge. And the fact that she didn't, that her intellect and survival and planning skills weren't used, is because the writers are assuring that Ezekiel will fail. But besides all that, not a lot happened in that story. We got a couple cool zombie kills from Jerry, who, by the way, if anybody has to die in this Ezekiel and Carol assault, it'll be Jerry. One of those zombie kills was given a little bit of focus. It was like a zombie with something that dripped all over it, and the question was asked like, what happened to this zombie? And then everybody was distracted by something else. Usually when something like that happens, that's them trying to lay in a subtle foreshadow for the rest of the season, early in the season, and disguise it as something that's unimportant. So, what's up with this zombie? I don't know. Kind of look like acid or goo. Maybe it's a new type of zombie if the show is really running out of ideas. I don't know, but I definitely think it's something to keep your eye on. So, that's the Kingdom. Moving on to, well, 2 different stories. I'm going to be talking about both the Aaron outside firefight story and the Morgan storming the satellite base story, because the 2 things are really connected. Before that, I'm going to say, spoiler again, these 2 stories in this episode fell victim to the show focusing on surprising the audience. That's kind of what the whole Abraham and Glenn death was all about. Really, the only reason Abraham died at all is so for a second the audience would think, oh, Glenn's safe, oh my gosh. A lot of times the show gets caught up on adapting something perfectly but doing it kind of the exact opposite, so the audience is surprised. And sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. So let's talk about what happened. Again, spoiler. In the issue of the comics where all of the groups are attacking the outposts, the first thing we see of the battle is this big double page, like Rick and Jesus running into battle, and then on the other side of the page there's Aaron and then Eric in front of him, just getting his head he's immediately dead. And then the rest of everybody moves on, and Aaron's like cradling him, and then Aaron picks up a gun and is gonna move forward. It was a pretty great moment when I first read it. Eric has never been anyone's favorite character, and I think it helps develop Aaron's character more, who is the character we care about. It was also like, oh, it's wartime. People with names are gonna die. But oh no, the show can't do that. because, oh, comic book fans will just be like, yep, knew that was gonna happen. So what do? They draw it out. They keep giving us these setup shots of Eric and Aaron looking at each other, Eric running for it, Aaron almost being in danger. You think, oh, Eric's gonna jump into the way, they're really gonna, oh my god, I can't believe it's gonna happen. And the whole time they're cutting to the other battle with Morgan, where he's leading two of the Hilltop guys through this outpost. If you don't remember these two, this guy is the guy who, right before they get to the hilltop, Abraham almost kills, and then later in the van, this guy's talking about that he saw his dead wife flash before his eyes right before Abraham almost killed him, and how this was related to Abraham choosing Sasha over Rosita. I always thought he was an excellent supporting actor. The other guy is the one who passed off the fake Gregory head, also at this same outpost. These two guys have a scene with Morgan before they go into this outpost, and they're like, you know, we could die in there, and he's like, I don't die. And sure enough, they're going through the outpost, and the scene is cutting back and forth between them and the Eric Aaron scene. Doom, 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 doom. And right when you feel that Eric is totally gonna get it, boom, Morgan and these two dudes open up a door, and they all three get machine gunned. Whoa. And I'll be honest, it totally did shock me. But the question here is that what it's all about? Is this show just about shocking the audience? Isn't it about telling the best story? Now, I'm not saying that this isn't the best story, because let's talk about it. At the end of the episode, after the audience is not worried about Eric anymore, he doesn't get shot in the head, but oops, oh, he just got shot in the stomach. And that's how the episode ends. So we don't know what happens to Eric, but he's still probably gonna die. So I think that's good. I mean, they're still doing the same thing. Eric might die, and they were still able to shock me. But of course, this is all dependent on if the thing that they shocked me with, this Morgan thing, is any good or not. So, for a little bit, we don't know what's happening. We come back and Morgan wakes up. He was wearing one of the Kingdom vests, he was off to the side. These two, not so lucky. He gets up, he gets their guns, and he goes on a rampage. One thing that super annoyed me was that Morgan didn't, like, shoot them both in the head to make sure they wouldn't turn into zombies. We get shots on both of them. Neither of them had a head wound, so they would turn into zombies. Morgan has that courtesy when he kills, like, a savior. He did it in the last episode. I know he was all, like, vengeful, but he was vengeful about these two guys. Put them out of their misery. Ah, I hate that. So he's going on this Terminator rampage, and he's shooting dudes off screen left and right. And the whole time we start to hear and see dialogue from this scene right before they attacked this outpost the last time. Rick is talking about how we have to fight the saviors, and Morgan is talking about how we don't have to fight and kill them. So as Morgan is going through and killing all these guys, he keeps hearing his own voice. And I was like, ooh, this is interesting. I'm very interested. I'll give it that. I was really excited because Morgan's like my favorite. So at least he would be if I knew like what he was about, because I'm super unsure. I was like really into him not killing people and that being something that he was going to struggle with. But then he got over that with a traumatic situation with Benjamin, who I didn't give a fuck about Benjamin, but I think Lenny James and Morgan are good enough actors and characters for me to buy it all. But now he's just killing, and I'm so happy to see that he's conflicted, and I think that it was represented very well with these flashbacks. Because if I was here reviewing it and they hadn't shown me those, I'd be like, well, what about that scene where Morgan was talking about specifically not attacking this place? Like, what about that? So good job, show. But then he's running through the hallway and he runs outside, and this oh shit. And he sees all of these saviors that Jesus has decided to spare, to take prisoner. And at the end of the line, he sees Jared, the douchebag dude who killed Benjamin. I thought the sound design here was amazing. He was blocking out all these noises, the light had blinded him. He's obviously showing us that he was in his own head, runs up to him, puts the gun on his chest, but then at the last minute, he hears Jesus trying to stop him, and he doesn't do it. And Jesus is like, that's not what we do. And Morgan takes a second and says, then what do we do? So Morgan's struggling. Similar to Carol, he doesn't know how to live without killing. And since Benjamin died, he's accepted that killing is a part of living in this world, because there's some bad dudes about. But it really all had to do with these clashing ideologies. How do we handle this war? Are we taking prisoners? And I think that's what this story is all about. And it looks like next episode that taking prisoners is probably going to come back to bite them all. So Morgan's getting a lot of mixed signals, and if taking prisoners goes wrong, then what kind of signal is that going to send Morgan? That's the big problem with this Morgan story. I'm not sure where we're going. Back to my main comparison between the Morgan scene and the Aaron and Eric scene, I actually think that this adaptation that was all about just surprising the audience actually worked out, depending on what happens to Morgan. If Morgan jumps back to not killing people, then jumps back to killing people and then just dies, you know, I think that they shouldn't have done this whole I don't die thing, this death fake out, and drawing out the Eric scene. So it all depends. So I guess I'll let you know. One last thing about Jesus. I complained in a video about the line change from episode 1, where Jesus in the comics says, all I have at the hilltop are a bunch of books. And in the show, he says, all I have at the hilltop is a bunch of books and an old lobster bib. I criticized this line for, 1, being stupid, and 2, the fact that the lobster bib was never talked about or seen, but apparently it is in Jesus's trailer or somewhere at the hilltop. We've seen it before, but guess what? I don't think that changes anything. I think it's a stupid line, and it's bad. So, let me know if you agree. So, for the final story. While the whole Eric and Aaron thing is happening outside Outpost number 1, Rick and Daryl go upstairs where only named main characters can go. They climb up an elevator shaft, separate, and then have very small stories. First, Daryl only does one thing. He's looking through a place, he opens a door, and he sees it's a cage. And it clearly reminds him of the cage that he spent time in at the sanctuary. And that's it. He has a little bit of a moment just looking at it, recalling, thinking that the saviors are evil. I mean, like, what else does that show us? And that's all he does. Maybe they'll pick up with him and he'll do something right at the beginning of the next episode, but whatever. Rick, on the other hand, he's looking for guns, he's trying to find the armory, he's about to get into a room when he gets tackled. We get a pretty awesome, just brawl between Rick and the savior guy. Rick ends up almost choking him out, but then sees, like, the most unlikely thing to impale somebody on, and impales him on it. There's a point in the fight where Rick spots that the guy he's chokeholding is looking at a specific room, and Rick's like, oh, is it in there? And the fight continues. Well, after the fight, after the guy's dead, Rick goes into the room, expecting to find guns, and then finds a baby. It's got her name, Gracie, in the background. There's a mirror for Rick to look at himself in. And we get his classic, no, oh, no. You know, him feeling really bad about himself. And I think this is a super surprising, super cool moment where Rick, who is a father trying to build a world for his kids, sees that people on Negan's side are also doing the same thing, and they're just trying to get by. It's a cool, complex moment that I'm a big fan of. So, he goes into another room, he's looking around, he goes up to a wall and he's like looking at a picture, and he picks it up and he's like, whoa. And then click, got a gun to his head, he turns, and it's Morales. Whoa! This has been rumored for a really long time, like, whatever happened to Morales? Are we ever gonna see Morales again? How could Morales get back into the picture? And I always thought that, like, we didn't need to. Most of the actors in Season 1 were hired by Frank Darabont, who created the show, who AMC didn't want to have anything to do with, so I would have never been surprised if we never saw him, because maybe the studio didn't want to work with him. But now he's back. Is he just going to, like, be in this next episode and then die? Maybe. Is he going to be incorporated into the show like Morgan was and stay in the show for a long time? Hopefully. With his return, there's a lot of questions that need to be answered. One, Rick got to Alexandria by taking a super long road trip from Georgia to Washington. That's a long trip that we're just supposed to accept that Morales also took by some chance. But okay, he's there. The picture that Rick had his wife in it, so I doubt she's alive. We also see a baby, not 2 kids. It's possible that it's Morales' baby, but what's most likely is that the guy that Rick just killed was the baby's father, trying to protect the baby. And I bet that that was most likely Morales' brother. Like in Season 1, they left to go find their family, and this is his family. He found, now all he's got is his brother. If they're related, this serves as a big problem. Rick just killed the guy. So in what universe is he, like, helping Rick after this point? If he's been in Negan's group, he's probably heard that Rick was in the picture, and he was probably like, oh shit, I know Rick Grimes, that's crazy, I'll just stay out of that for my family's sake. And now it's obviously been brought to him. In Season 1, Morales could have been considered a main character. He was part of the Atlanta scout group with Glenn. When Rick handcuffed Merle to the roof on their way out of town, Morales said, oh, we gotta worry about Merle's brother. I mean, he's the first person to introduce us to Daryl. And speaking of Daryl, maybe that's something that could make Morales side with our team. Daryl had a brother who died, who Rick handcuffed to a roof, yet Daryl is now more Rick's brother than he ever was Merle's. So maybe if Morales saw both of them together, that would spark something. There's also the fact that when Morales was leaving, Rick gives him a revolver with some ammo. He wants to see him survive. I would have really liked it if the gun that Morales had been pointing to Rick was the gun that Rick gave him. That would be a hint that there's any kind of hope that these two could get together. But as it stands right now, if Rick giving them the gun and Daryl being there, if none of that really helps, then I think Morales will just be making a cameo and he'll be out in the next few episodes. But of course, only time will tell. Alright, that is all for me for episode 2. Please let me know what you thought of the episode and all of the Outpost shenanigans down in the comments section. I didn't really talk about Tara and Jesus. Are those your favorite characters? Let me know what you think. I just started a Patreon account, so if you would like to support the channel, the link is both down in the description and probably in an orb somewhere around me. As always, follow me on Twitter and watch it again. This has been The Dude. See ya.